All right. Good cold morning to everyone listening. Okay. Please allow me to introduce our guest today, a respected authority in the world of functional health, holistic lifestyle, and someone I would consider a master strategist in helping people from all over the world get back on the road to health. Okay. And that doesn't only include nutrition, but self-love. I mean, self-love is the ultimate factor for individual health. It's a true honor to have you here this morning with us, Jason Boyd.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's very kind.
Yeah. So can you start out just by telling us a little about yourself?
Not much to tell, really. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. For those that don't know, I essentially, what I like to say is I help people die slower. Run labs on people, find out exactly what's going on in them, and work to correct any imbalances and teach them all about lifestyle modifications and different strategies and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, straightforward.
Yeah. I love the message you give about self-love. I think that's really important. And, making sure that people recognize that health is not only part of your plate, but also the message you give yourself on a daily basis. And it's important to, make sure that you are showing yourself love, because, people they want to eat healthy unless they love themselves. And that's truly the baseline for that. So I think that's really important. And I love your message of that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I found out early on when working with clients, it seemed like no matter what a person was dealing with, it seemed to always come back to some kind of issue with self-love. They didn't think they were good enough. They didn't think they were capable enough. And whether that story was something that happened to them in their childhood or something more recent, it was a big enough issue that I realized that I made the connection, and that this thing had to be taken care of first before we can move forward. Because when you think about it, I have my 2-year-old son back here. I would never poison someone I love, right? And yet we tend to do that just about every single day. We poison our bodies with one thing or another: poisonous thoughts, things we eat, the things we breathe in. And so, I just found this correlation between not poisoning something you love and turning it into this self-love idea. And so I started working on trying to get people to acknowledge those things and work with somebody more qualified than me on some kind of counseling issues or whatever to deal with that. So yeah, it's a big part of my message, because I think it's really kind of at the root of everything.
It is. I absolutely agree. I think vitamin D and minerals and things like that are very important, but I've seen people that don't have that love, and nothing in the world really can help them until they find and discover that. That goes with relationships, everything else too. So I think you're spot on. Nothing's going to work. No nutrition's going to help unless the person really knows how to love themselves. And that's difficult to do. And I'm sure you've probably had experiences with people that, in the way our society seems lubricated for everyone to get in the ground as quick as possible. The minute you start talking about self-love and appreciating and recognizing the poisons. I mean, it's hard to do when literally $38 billion a year are spent on convincing us in this country that we need to have surgery, that we need to have drugs.
Right.
Ordinary states of depression are biochemistry anomalies in the brain that has to be treated with a drug. So I think it's really important to get grounded with people and have them recognize and be able to see through all the bombardment of garbage that we're
right.
in. And especially one other thing about United States is we're unique, is that only United States and New Zealand allow what's called direct-to-consumer advertising, and that's
right.
commercials on TV. Ask your doctor if this drug's right for you. It's outlawed everywhere else, and the United States has models on TV selling you drugs. So
right.
It's sometimes even more difficult to get to people and really get them grounded to where they understand. Rely on your body. You got to love your body, and your body can get you out of this mess. So beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
How did you go about finding this path in life? What kind of events started that led you down the road to working with people's health and trying to get them back on the track of feeling good?
Okay, so this is most people that I know when they tell their story about how they got into this. It seems to revolve around some kind of health issue that they were dealing with. I haven't. I've never dealt with any kind of major health issue. I've always tried to take care of myself. And it doesn't mean that, I did everything right when I was younger. I did a lot of really stupid stuff, and I probably shouldn't be here today. But as I grew older and wiser, I learned to take care of myself better and put forth that effort. I was a chef and restaurant owner for about 20 years. I owned a couple of restaurants. And during that time, I was really passionate about food and about nutrition and about how the things that we put in our body affected our body. But even back then, I realized that there was a connection between, the conviviality and the connection around the table with people and the conversations. And it was always a celebration of some sort. And so there was a mind-body connection. Even back then, this was, I was 27, I guess. So, it was a long time ago. But so I was really passionate about food and about nutrition. And so I just always studied on my own. And that's, my whole life, I've pretty much been kind of a self-starter and taught myself just about everything I know. And so, I don't know, through the years as I progressed, I would start teaching cooking classes, things about nutrition and stuff, and how, people could stop eating this way and start eating this way, and just making incremental changes. And then, I don't know, it just seemed to be a natural fit somewhere about 5-6 years ago. I was exhausted. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was going to pick up my restaurant and move to another big city to where I could make a lot of money. But I was working 100+ hours a week, and I never saw my kids. And I just didn't want that lifestyle anymore. So I wanted to slow down and actually be outside in the sunshine. So I just took a leap of faith, and I decided not to do restaurants anymore. And instead I went a different path, and I, started studying and went through the FDN program and precision nutrition and some other things, and a great mentorship program with Dr. Patel at the Living Proof Institute. And I just kind of took off from there. So that's really kind of my story on how I got into it. It was just a pure passion. And because I always felt good, I never had any serious health challenges, I thought, man, everybody should feel this good, So I've always wanted to share that with people. And then the life I lead, is pretty unconventional compared to most people. And so I've always wanted to be able to share what I do in my life during my day, and how accessible it is to everyone if they just put forth a little bit of effort. And so that's really it, I think.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. Yeah, it's easy to put that effort into place whenever you develop that care of yourself. You want to feel your best. So that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it, man. That's great. So what's your opinion on what are the fundamentals, in your opinion, of health that a person needs to obtain in order to, make life for health?
Sorry, I've got my 2-year-old here.
That's all right. I got my 4-year-old in the office too. So
he's curious about what's going on here. Say hi. I'll tell you. The fundamentals, that's a funny question too. People are always, I get messages all the time about what can I do for this issue or that issue, and they try to complicate things, and I always try to take it back and say, how are you sleeping? What time do you go to bed at night? How much water do you drink? What is your mindset like? Taking it back, people want to complicate it so much, and I just try and put all that aside and say, what about these things first? Are you doing those? Because if you're not doing those, nothing else that you're doing beyond that really matters. So for me, the fundamentals come down to number one, I believe, would be sunlight, circadian rhythms. We know that just about every single cell in the body is governed or mediated by light. And so, we have developed a culture where we don't go outside in the sun. We cover up with clothes. We cover up with sunblock. We've been taught to fear the sun. And it's a real shame because it is probably the number one driver of health, and it's free. So that would be number one. So sunlight, circadian rhythms, and then sleep. I think, would be right up there, because that's when all of our repair and regeneration programs kick on. So without that, you know, you're kind of sunk. After that, I would probably put water. You know, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Gerald Pollack and his work with the 4th phase of water. So I think if people were to watch some of his videos on YouTube or read his book, they would be blown away by how water affects the human organism, and how that works in conjunction with sunlight. And then I think rounding out number 5 would probably be food or nutrition. Nutrition, yeah, that's probably kind of at the bottom of my list. You know, it's important, but I think those other things are more important. Those are the fundamentals for me.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think sunlight is, and you're right. We've talked to been afraid of it. I do a winter lecture, and I give some pretty stunning literature on the number of diseases, cancers that are all preventable. I mean, everything including just from adequate sunlight. And
right.
I'm sure you see this with your clients. I see that a lot of this with my clients. People, they've been told to be afraid of the sun. They've been told to clear up with those harmful chemicals and avoid the sun. And it's just that's something definitely need to
yeah.
Now they're starting fundamentals to start blocking it. You know, in the spring of 2019, spraying more trails, which means that they've been doing that for about 10 years now. So I think vitamin D is one of the most important supplements you can have. It's the biggest bang for buck. But again, if you aren't practicing the fundamentals, loving yourself, if you're not sleeping good, if you're not having good digestion, vitamin D doesn't even come into play. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Digestion's absolutely a huge one too. You know, it's funny. I had put together a program a couple of years ago, 30 Days of Vitalogic, and it's a free program. And so it's basically, it was the fundamentals, the 30 most fundamental things I think every human should be doing. And I kind of put it in order of most important to least important, and really they're all important. But yeah, sunlight, circadian rhythms, and sleep, those are the top 3, because I think they are so critical. And I've had people go through that program and do nothing else, and then email me or something and say, man, I never knew how much of an impact sunlight would have, or just going to bed early would have. I don't have the depression that I had before. I don't have this anxiety or this brain fog or whatever. I mean, it's like something just kind of went, you know, and there was the sun, you know, literally and figuratively. And so, yeah, it's really amazing if people just really take the time, make a little bit of effort to expose themselves and get back to how the human animal was designed to live. You know, it's a thing that I write about a lot, is that, you know, our environment is changing at a pace faster than our biology can adapt to. And so we're struggling, and we keep throwing things out, the EMFs and the 5G and the bad diet and the chemicals in the water, and you know, pharmaceutical drugs and stuff that are in our waters. You know, our bodies are having a hard time. We're struggling trying to keep up. So anything that you can do to optimize your health, and you've got to do it in this day and age, or you're sunk, I think. And those things are free, right? We can all go stand out in the sunshine barefoot. We can all turn our phones off at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night, and go to sleep and get some good sleep. You know, pretty simple, but not easy.
No, it's not easy. And like I said, you're going to be going against the grain, because this is not the norm anymore. And the norm is now getting us in trouble. I have some numbers written on the board in there. You know, all these things happening. 1975, 1 in 5,000 kids was autistic, and now it's 1 in 36.
Right.
You know, 1 in 4 kids has a major allergy. 1 in 8 kids has some kind of attention deficit spectrum problem. 1 out of 2 adults have major depression today.
Right.
2 adults will have cancer, be diagnosed with cancer before they die.
Yeah.
And dementia now is affecting the entire populations. University of Virginia released a major study a while back, and they watched 12,000 people for like 10 years. It was a major cohort study, and they said at the end of it, if you live in America and you're 28 years old, 100% of you are already showing early cognitive dysfunctional signs. So it's very, very apparent that this lifestyle of getting away from nature and living in the cubicles, living with fluorescent lights, getting away from sun is definitely having an impact on us. And that's one of the fundamentals I tell people is you've got to get back in touch. You got to ground, especially with the 5G stuff, get a grounding sheet, but you got to, even on a cold day like today, you can sit in a garage with a concrete floor, put your bare feet on it in a lawn chair, bring a book, don't bring your phone, defeats the purpose, and sit for 30 minutes and discharge some of these electrons that we're starting to really accumulate. I mean, this is disastrous. I've seen a number of patients in the last few weeks affected by this 5G, and particularly if you are heavy and you have heavy metal toxicity, it's going to be even worse. Right. So getting out and connecting with nature, going to a nice park, sitting around trees where you're getting some fresh air, getting good spring water. I love your post, it was several months back where you travel this far to get spring water for your boys. Well, they're worth it. And it's hard to see that with parents today. I see parents, well, if I don't get him vaccinated, he can't go to school. And I'm like, well, how important is your child to you? You got to make these important choices, right? It's disastrous, but that's kind of the new norm today.
Yeah, it is. And, I try to always be really, really understanding and forgiving. I think, at the heart of it, every parent loves their child. We all want the best for our child. And it's tough, it's tough when you don't have the knowledge. It's tough when you don't have the support. It's tough when you're listening to your doctor, your pediatrician, to the commercials on TV, to every ad that's put in front of you, to, things you read in some random Facebook group. It's constant inundated with misinformation and disinformation. And so yeah, again, I think that's the kind of where I try to come from a lot when I write is, really make it accessible to people to understand, like, this is really possible to do. You can do this. You just have to put forth a little bit of effort. And you certainly don't have to make all of these changes at once, right? Just start with the smallest change that you can possibly think of and do that and call that a win, and then build on that, and we're not going to be perfect. I tell my boys all the time, it's not about perfection. It's about optimization. Learn the rules so that you know how to break those rules intelligently, so that when you want to go off to a birthday party or you want to go do something somewhere else and eat something that's less than good for you or whatever, you know how it's going to affect your body, you know how you're going to feel, and you know how you're going to be able to remedy that the next day or something, right? And so we all have to live here in this modern world. We all want to have a good time. We all have a bit of a hedonistic bent to us from time to time. So, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I have no qualms with having a scotch and a pizza from time to time. I'm not going to beat myself up over it because we want to live too, right? But just be kind to yourself and just try to make small changes wherever you can.
Yeah, totally love it. Absolutely. And that's what I tell people is if you're healthy, you can be a little more resilient, and you can definitely take those birthday parties and the scotch and the pizza and whatever else, the holidays, we just got finished with. It's always nice to see someone.
Superfood.
Yeah. It's always nice to see people who can't tolerate that kind of stuff. They're absolutely unable to tolerate any kind of, giving away from the norm. If they have to eat certain foods, otherwise they have a reaction.
Right.
Have those people learn those things, learn their body, get in control, make powerful choices. And then when they go out after they've changed their lifestyle and they do venture out, they go, to a bar or they go to a bowling alley or something and they eat a little bit. They're like, man, surprised I didn't feel much worse. And it's nice to know that they can strengthen themselves and they can tolerate those things. But if you do it on a day-to-day basis, it's just a recipe for disaster. So.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. That's the thing that I try to instill in all my clients. When people come to me, I'm kind of the last resort. They've gone through all these other doctors, and it's not uncommon for me to be dealing with somebody who has just been through 10 different doctors and still hasn't found any answers. And so they're kind of resistant whenever they meet me and like, so what are you actually going to do for me? And how can you really help me? And they're afraid that they're going to have to give up all of this stuff and never get to have a beer or never get to have bread or dairy or whatever it is. And I tell people, my goal is at the end of our time together if you can't have that stuff still, then we still have work to do. You know, I want people to be metabolically flexible.
Yeah.
I want you to be able to go for a day without food if you have to. I want you to be able to fuel your body on carbs, or fuel your body on ketones, or fuel your body on whatever. For some people, obviously, with an autoimmune disease or whatever, you're going to have to give up certain things probably for the rest of your life if you don't want to have some kind of flare up of some symptoms. But by and large, you know, I tell people, we're going to get you back to a state where, you know, you're going to have to give these things up initially, but we can start adding them back in. And then later on down the road, Thanksgiving or a birthday or whatever, you want to have a piece of birthday cake, man, have it, you know, see how you feel. You may not like it, but at least it's not going to wreck you for the next 2 or 3 weeks, you know? So being metabolically flexible in every way, I think, is really important as a human, because that's kind of how we came up, right? We went through periods of starvation, and we went through periods of, you know, having a lot of food and just eating whatever came our way. So
the diversity of food that we've had before, you know, our ancestors just across the plains would come across 147 different diversities of food, and today we're down to the, you know, 30s or 40s. So I think that's always been kind of a factor too. I love that metabolic flexibility. I love that word. That's excellent, and it's a good judge of how they're overall doing, how wrecked they get from, you know, perhaps a birthday cake or something like that. And
right.
oftentimes if they have an ill effect, you can always tell them, well, that's your body's way of telling you that that's nutritionally void food, you know, that, you know, nowadays, if you look at cake, it's not necessarily the cake we had when we were kids. It's more or less a chemical cascade of things that even ants, you know, go around.
Right.
These GMO foods that nature doesn't even recognize, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important for us to recognize and watch out for those, especially if we're already immunity compromised. So.
Right. Yeah. You know, that's one thing that I try to get across too is make a differentiation between food and food products. That's a big deal. And so, you know, when it comes down to teaching people a little bit about diet or nutrition, I'm kind of a dietary agnostic. You know, I think all diets work for one reason or another. To me, all diets are just a philosophy. Pick the philosophy that you're going to be able to stick with on your worst day. Because, you know, when things fall apart and you want to go back in the kitchen and just, you know, cram something in your face, you're going to destroy yourself if you're being really rigid. You know, you're either going to destroy yourself physically or mentally, emotionally, or both. And so, yeah, that's a big deal there.
And do you think it's important when you are initially consulting with clients and talking about these fears that they have of, I'm gonna have to give up everything? Do you think it's important to maintain a good diet, maybe 85 to 90% of the time, and that way, maybe on like a Sunday, they can kind of enjoy themselves, and that way they don't feel like they're in this prison, you know? Because I think if you tell someone you can't eat this anymore at all, sometimes people will tend, you know, they might do it for a few weeks, they might feel pretty good, and then they'll feel like they're in this prison. And then once they feel like they break out, instead of just having a few bites, they absolutely go crazy. But
right.
Good idea to have them some flexibility, maybe one day of the week where they could, you know, go eat a burger or go eat something else, enjoy a little bread or something like that. What's your thoughts on that?
You know, it's, I tell people, this isn't my program. This is your program. You know, yeah. I'm going to do 20% of the work. You're going to do 80% of the work. And that's where I think part of the benefit of having the lab work comes in, because the labs can show us exactly how your digestive system is working. It's going to show us exactly how, you know, everything is working here in the body and how it's functioning. And is there some kind of dysfunction or dysregulation? And so those typically, they provide a lot of really good correlation for somebody that makes them want to do better, because now they can see it in black and white, like, oh man, yeah, I can tell, like when I eat this is exactly how I feel, you know, and it'll kind of show up on paper a little bit. But yeah, you know, still going back to that whole idea of what's the smallest change that you can make? And let's just start with that. And so I try not to put too much pressure on diet. Again, obviously, if somebody's working with some kind of yeast or fungal overgrowth, you're going to have to cut out some sugars.
Yeah.
If you're dealing with some kind of autoimmune disease or Hashimoto's, you're probably going to need to give up some gluten and some other things for a while. So, you know, I tell them these are drivers of your inflammation, drivers of, you know, your immune system faltering right now. And so you need to give them up. If you don't, this problem is going to continue. And I like to break my program up into phases. And so we'll go 30, 45 days with one phase before we move on to the next phase and the next phase. But initially I like to build people up, get some vitality going, get them sleeping better, get them pooping better, get them just clear-headed a little bit better, get them hydrated. And how quickly they progress, you know, that's up to them, and how serious they are about changing their diet and eliminating the things they need to. If they've got to have a cheat day or something like that, you know, so be it. But I just tell them, you know, it's how we progress through this is going to depend on you and how serious you want to be with it. And so, you know, I kind of let that fall on the individual. Find out exactly what works for them. There is no one right way for everybody. So we just find out what works for them and build off of that. Make it as simple, I guess, if we want to call it simple. We know it's not really simple, but make it as easy as possible to make those changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Really good. And you kind of hit a good point. The average person that walks in my door has seen on average 12 doctors before they come here. And I introduce myself as Gabe. I don't even go by doctor. The name doctor means to teach. Most people that come in are completely clueless. I'm sure you see the same thing.
Yeah.
My policy states the patient always determines the outcome.
Exactly.
The person authentically, and that's the way it is with any professional out there, any healthcare professional, any dentist, even a psychologist. You have to be compliant with certain things for maybe the drug to work better or lessons to work better. It's the same with this. You have to, you're in charge of your own destiny essentially, and each step you do is going to either create or uncreate illness. So
yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really great to be able to take somebody, and if I can talk them, like if I know for sure that certain things that they're eating are exacerbating their problems, and I can say, look, just do yourself a favor for 7 days. Let's just go 7 days without this thing, and let's just see what it does to your body, you know. And 9 times out of 10, you know, they'll do it, and then they'll call me and be like, I just pooped for the first time in a week, you know, or something like that. So once they're able to make that connection between what they're putting in their mouth and what's coming out, or how they feel, or some flare up or something like that, then that's another huge light bulb that just goes on. And it's like, oh my God, you know, now they're really excited, and now they really want to know more. They want to do more and see how far they can take it. So that's where I think it's important with the small changes. Make as many small changes as possible. Make as many small changes as possible, and then build on that, you know, just build on those little wins.
On those little wins. Yeah. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So, how do potential clients reach you?
I primarily just do everything through Facebook. You know, I mean, I've got a website, biologicalhealthandnutrition.com, which is a tremendous amount of letters to type. I actually probably should change that, but yeah, biologicalhealthandnutrition.com. I've got everything online there, all my scheduling, everything I write, my free program. Everybody can sign up for that if they want to there. But otherwise, you know, I make myself as accessible as possible, you know, primarily via Facebook and email. And I work with clients all over the world from my home. You know, that's kind of the way I've set up my lifestyle to be able to do that. So I can work with anybody wherever.
I personally have a goal of about 5 years from now. I want to do everything from home. So it looks like that's a much funner route, especially on days like today. So but we're getting close to the time, and I just wanted to thank you very much for your insights and your information today. Hope to do this again in the future with you. And I just just tell you, thanks for all your messages. I learn a lot from how you explain things, how you explain food. The organic acid tests, you're talking about those lately. I think that's great for people to understand, because those tests people aren't familiar with. And, and a lot of people that come to you and come to me aren't even familiar with there's testing methods like that. So I think that's fabulous. Give knowledge to the people and let them kind of make the choice from there.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. You know, lab testing is a huge issue. You know, again, I get people coming to me with their lab results, and they're like, hey, you know, I'm fine. My doctor says everything is okay here. There's nothing wrong with my blood, you know, blood work or whatever. And that's the only lab they've run. And then I'll run it through my software program and my little spreadsheet, and then show them like, yeah, here's actually the ranges. And so then we explain ranges and difference between functional ranges and conventional ranges, and then how this points to this, and how all of these in conjunction with one another can, you know, point the finger that perhaps we really need to do something else and do some more testing. Yeah, it makes
functional lab testing versus disease related.
Yeah, it makes a big difference for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Jason. This has been great.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great. I'm gonna get this one taken care of. I need to go down for a nap.